What's up, Goth Gamer Nation? I tried so hard to be good. I really did. I never wanted to hurt nobody. So I took a moment to check out the next wave of upcoming titles featured in Steam's Next Fest. As always, there are some preliminary points I'd like to hit before we proceed. 1, nothing wrong with me. Points 2 through 4 refer to point 1. Sometimes I write jokes that are for me, not really you. I like to check in on some projects that I've previously covered and get a read on their progress, lack of progress, or quiet demise. Ambrosia Sky Act 1, the immersive sim-adjacent fungal horror and grief explorer, was released around the end of last year and is currently sitting at very positive with user reviews, and its second act is planned to release a month from now, a month from my writing, as a free update to existing owners, and if you haven't opted in, then you'll be rightfully punished with a higher price point for both. Lovecraftian first-person shooter Beneath was also released around the same time in slightly stuttery condition, resulting in a mixed standing with Steam users, though the developer has since provided some updates and new play modes. The Spanish-infused survival horror Bioshock-like Crisol, Theater of Idols, released early this year and is sitting at very positive in regard to user reviews, and has received regular updates for its PC version, though by glancing at the community tab, it might not seem that way given how much expectation is thrust onto a game the same price as a burrito. Also released this year was the noir-tinged horror point-and-click game The Dark Rites of Arkham, which stands at overwhelmingly positive. Lots of these games actually came out because I missed one or two of these. It's actually refreshing having anything to report. Of course, it would not be a Next Fest update without at least one of these projects fading into the abyss that awaits behind them all, eagerly gnashing its teeth. Sadly, the occult-themed 7th generation style third-person shooter Directorate Novitiate, the planned first game from Quebec studio Nesting Games, has ceased development after their parent company, Digital Bros, claimed the team was unable to define the scope of the game, which is really unfortunate because it was a promising demo that was unshakably exactly my kind of shit. But I think we can all agree that despite some comments I have received, I should not personally be blamed for any disappointment you may feel, right? We can agree on that? Like, I didn't do fucking anything. However, a game that did come out this year and is sitting at very positive reviews is the fast-paced, Y2K-soaked arena shooter Don't Stop Girly Pop. And in the same boat, and vying for the title of most mouthful of a title, is Hell of Fear Mind Breach, the sci-fi horror shooter system-like, though it's still got under 100 reviews and could use some more eyes on it. So if you enjoy frantically shooting ghouls in a dusty space station while managing a grid of junk, there are numerous bundles containing this game available. Fuck, I missed so much. Isometric comic adaptation survival game I Hate This Place was released on PC and all consoles physically, though its rating on Steam seems to be sitting at mixed, which appears to stem from some optimization issues and its $30 price tag. The former is kind of fair because even in the footage I used, you can see how slow the frame rate is. Also out, with a mixed reception, is Industria 2, the more survival horror-styled sequel to Bleak Mill's 2021 game. This one stumbled out of the gate at launch, and the team quickly set about crafting a series of patches, with one even coming out a couple weeks ago. This, combined with the changes in playstyle, seem to have divided its already niche audience. I, however, think if you don't mind a shorter, atmosphere-focused horror game, both are made with a lot of love, worth your time, and are priced below $30. Faring much better is the isometric 1980s ARPG Kingdom of Night from Friends of Safety, which is sitting at very positive and receiving frequent fixes and updates, and the same could also be said for Pathologic 3 and Winter Burrow, which are both out and proud. That's all the games I covered in the last video that have updates, but stretching way further back to when I was doing videos for single demos, just destroying my own algorithm. One I was very enamored with was a lo-fi paranormal detective game called Loveland from Devour Games. And the last time I even spoke this game's name was about 4 years ago. But I'm pleased to report that the game is back in development after financial troubles involving unpaid invoices from a contract client threw it off schedule for 2 years, and by the sounds of it, they were pretty close to being finished with it, so if you were still waiting for that, as you were, and if you forgot you were waiting for that, take your pills. The only other thing I can think of before I talk about demos is that I fully intended to include the Sinking City 2, because despite the what I felt to be misguided turns the original's plot takes and some Slav jank throughout, I did appreciate and respect what they were going for and how seriously they were taking the material and repurposing it for their own designs, so I was pleased to hear that they were working on a sequel, especially considering the immense difficulty of being a Ukrainian game developer, and I even backed the Kickstarter for it. That said, either this demo is poorly optimized or my aging 3070 just couldn't give it what it needed, and I had a hell of a time just keeping the thing from turning into a slideshow. I'm sure it's that, but then again, I had no trouble running the demo for games like Valor Mortis, which seems similarly graphics intensive. I didn't really like it, so I'm including it as an honorary entry, but at the moment I can't gather useful footage from it, and I'll simply say that I think it's interesting that from what I can tell it has become more narrowed, more survival horror focused, and characters have been better defined. I like where it's headed. I kind of wish that the lead character looked as like sleepy and fucked up as in the Sinking City 1, but that's neither here nor there. I don't want to see this guy smiling. About Fishing is an upcoming fishing and psychological thriller mystery game from developer The Water Museum behind 2024's Arctic Eggs. It being the now third or so fishing simulator with a dark twist I've included in these videos, I'm forced to reckon with the possibility that I may just like fishing games, and this is my cowardly way of expressing that. Especially since of the handful I've played, this one seems to be the most fishing-centric of them. Like, yeah, there is a dark, surreal narrative playing out, but the whole time, the thing you're doing to advance the plot is fishing. And it makes sense within the game's logic, which is certainly Lynchian and dreamlike, two phrases I imagine you'll hear me say a few times, for the rest of my life. The tutorial section of the demo follows a young girl fishing with her grandfather in hopes of being rewarded with a bizarre narrative motif of curly fries in a scene that could represent the imagination of a child or some sort of actual magic that exists in this world. A school of yellow fish leads us to pull a woman from the water, one who's been reported missing. She's dead, wrapped in a semi-synthetic polymer. Concerned about the lasting effect seeing this will have on a child, the grandfather does something that seems to stand as one of the core mysteries of this story, and doesn't alert authorities, and instead takes the body somewhere. The second half of the demo follows a significant time jump where the protagonist has become an adult and her grandfather has been imprisoned in the basement of a church. Due to erosion, the cemetery in which the body found in the opening was buried has become flooded and replete with fish, offering a new opportunity to definitively solve the cold case of her murder with nothing but good old-fashioned fish wisdom. The normal, not weird at all, act of fishing works just fine as it is, drawing inspiration from Dreamcast titles like Sega Bass Fishing. The tutorial even mirrors the calibration of the fishing controller one could use for the console's 6 total fishing games, but not Big the Cat's levels in Sonic Adventure because humanity isn't ready to see gaming perfected. Standing as an eerily beautiful reenactment of the exact era I tell myself was better than this one, but of course that data is corrupted, by my being a stupid idiot child, free from the worries of humanity's circular pattern of self-destruction. There are, however, a number of other fishing-related mechanics that are less concerned about realism that you'll find yourself taking part in as you attempt to unravel a supernatural-flavored murder mystery that may or may not involve mermaids, such as tying a caught fish to a line and controlling it to dredge items from the water, be it upgrades to your grid inventory, lost gear, or clues that can be pinned to a sort of pull-out corkboard. This gameplay is strong enough to just be the entirety of About Fishing. The fishing, of course. But the game's other primary influence is Shenmue, and that is reflected in its own special way. Outside of the water, you can participate in little side quests that aren't fishing but utilize the fishing rod for problem solving, like rescuing a goldfish from a bird. Pretty much any interaction with NPCs shares the uncanniness of Shenmue dialogue, only everyone is clearly going through something mentally on top of that interference.
Oh, that was nice of her. Didn't have to do that. Is there a rotate button here?
Oh! You can sell fish at the convenience store to afford new fishing supplies, or cut them up horribly and get no money, as I have done here, whilst distracted by someone talking to me. You can visit your incarcerated grandfather, or from the looks of it, repopulate an empty aquarium with the various creatures you find Animal Crossing style, based on the vague instruction of its curator. All the pieces of a relaxing, irreverent life sim sort of game are here, but the characters within it are able to feel the malaise that one would feel if they were sort of extorted to fish and capture spiders to pay off a house on the Isle of Dr. Moreau. This rather lengthy demo shows off a great deal of About Fishing's lo-fi, retro, remembered wrong aesthetic, and there are environments like the convenience store that are more beautiful to me than the contents of the Louvre. The thing is, attempting this style isn't uncommon. Like, I only chose to show 10 demos that I felt gelled with my interests, but I actually played like maybe 50 or so of them, and there are plenty that I think nail a certain art style or have landed on a kind of novel influence soup or mechanic even in which to present a story, cultivate a tone, but for many of them it certainly feels like that's as far as they thought to go, and many of these I've played previous versions of demos or checked back in and they're still stalled on really making the other parts of the game live up to how cool they look. So I think About Fishing is a great example of perfectly marrying your art style to the rest of the game's elements, playing off the darkly comedic dissonance. It feels like if game development sort of lingered in 1999, then we would eventually possibly go this dreamy with fishing games. Because let's be real, after 6 on the same console, you have to imagine you're gonna find a dead body eventually. Entropy is an upcoming dark fantasy tactical CRPG from developer Lovely Hellplace, responsible for 2024's Dread Delusion. And there is a pretty clear visual through line from that project into this one, also taking place in a grim, dark, bruise-colored, mushroom-infested shit world, where everything sucks and humanity is spread apart into makeshift villages run by tyrants, and outside their walls are nothing but demons, curses, and bandits. But where Dread Delusion drew more inspiration from early 2000s end of 5th generation into 6th games, like King's Field 4 and Elder Scrolls 3, Entropy feels firmly planted in the same era's JRPG output. Games like Vagrant Story, Kudelka, notes of Final Fantasy IX as well. In the demo, a group of hungover stage actors put on a play that very cleverly serves as your build creator. While the character struggles to remember details of their role in the play, you're deciding on weapon proficiency and core attributes. You can also choose your gender. How many genders are there? At least 3. It's not long until the performance is interrupted by a gang of demons. The guards, knowing how fucked they are, yell to the actors to take up arms and join them in glorious battle. These freaks wanna bust up our town? Let's give these We're all dead. That was stupid. We shouldn't have done that. While lingering someplace between life and death, a spirit of some sort, perhaps unable to resurrect a more helpful person among the dead, relents that we will have to do, and we are brought back to life, tasked with reporting the attack to a higher authority. The demo itself can sometimes feel a little bogged down in tutorial. It's got a lot of detailed explanations of menus, submenus, and systems, how you can recruit colorful characters into your band of scared and sickly survivors, what their formation and loadout should be, but a lot of that stuff will be second nature if you've played tactical RPGs from the era, because while Entropy does introduce its own ideas and modernizations, its core is pretty familiar, and if you're not familiar, you can't say they aren't being accommodating about it. When walking around an area, you'll see an enemy lurking around, and they have a cone of vision that if you cross, they will lock onto you and initiate a fight. But if you manage to sneak behind them and backstab them, then the fight kicks off slightly weighted in your favor. Your team is lined up with a sort of defense and melee row that protects your ranged and magic row, and I believe the demo is giving you a lot of access to powers and items that are just to show you that you'll get them, but not that you'll get them so early. But even with them, there is a particular scrappy, just making it by feeling to combat. Like, sure, you have someone on your team that can cast a spell that summons acidic bile to vanquish your foes, but that's the only spell she knows, and she's not really good at casting it. The most capable person I recruited was the last known Strigoi hunter, only he's never actually fought one. He's just like the last person that kind of knows the theory of how one would, should the opportunity ever present itself. And should someone in your party die, they are just sort of gone forever, which adds a heaviness to it, given that they are also pretty well-defined characters. When you leave a settlement or area of interest, you'll enter an overworld map in which you can camp out and chat with your crew, tell them why you don't have money to pay them this time, but you also run the risk of triggering these text adventure style events that could negatively or positively impact your journey. This is something that is also sometimes used to sort of replace an elaborate cutscene, but it does feel more engaging than watching my characters, do a bunch of cool shit while I sit here uselessly. I may have found fewer demos to talk about this next fest, but Entropy is one of a handful here that I think has a remarkably firm grasp on their own world. I mean, it's one that's kind of recognizable, kind of medieval, definitely theatrical. Like at one point I killed a demon and he used his dying breath to say, "Out! Out, brief candle." The less upsetting version of vile jelly. But it would be impossible to find a real life, time, and place for it. It's just its own thing, but confidently so with a particular voice, and the art and presentation of it all plays off that really well. I especially enjoy the sort of Mike Mignola style drawings that accompany most of the characters. There's a part where you just sort of walk by a mass of flesh and organs with a face that some soldiers have strung up to interrogate, but they can't figure out how to hurt it or get it to stop making fun of them, and it's not relevant to a quest or anything. It's just a normal weird thing happening in a weird world.
Severed demon head, huh? Well, see you later.
Glasshouse is an upcoming feudal punk, their words, dark comedy CRPG from a development collective named Flat 28. Following the infuriating and frankly unforgivable death of Disco Elysium's next entry, numerous splinter factions boasting variable numbers of the original game's staff have since sprouted up, promising to step up and fill the vacuum left in its absence. The entity wearing Zom's meat has also made a bid to prove themselves still capable of making games like Disco Elysium without its core creators. A game which looks like it might be good enough, though I doubt I'll ever know, as the idea of playing it feels like crossing a picket line. This is to say nothing of the indie efforts to capture Disco's narrative-rich and fearlessly political take on the detective RPG. Glasshouse being undoubtedly one of them, and perhaps the one that so far has come closest to fingering some of Elysium's magic from the corners of the bag. Obviously, it's a smaller team and a smaller budget, but what they've wisely chosen to do with this game that is so clearly a result or reaction to the COVID pandemic is set it in a locked down apartment building where a murder mystery will play out within its confines. And through dialogue, narration, reading materials, and the environment, you will be drip-fed information about the uniquely polarized post-capitalist alt-history world spinning outside that is barreling towards a world war no matter what we do. We play as a dying working-class man named Wieldmere, the deputy condo chief in part responsible for maintaining order within the building, which has been locked down for 57 days now for fear of a nuclear attack. While handing out rations and attempting to quell tensions between tenants, we learn that an entire family has been annihilated by someone who is locked in the building with you. Glasshouse's protagonist is built on a political compass where ideologies carry with them traits that will affect dialogue options, skill checks, and combat. I feel like they sidestep some ruffled feathers by inventing make-em-up ideologies that are stand-ins for others like Confucianism or holisticism, so even though it doesn't come right out and say communism, seeing as in the first minute of gameplay you're told both there is a specter haunting the fiefdom and which side are you on, it makes its presence known. The choir of Elysium's voices are replaced by a more metatextual choir, like the actors in the Pathologic series. A voice of commentary to match the more descriptive voice of the director, depicted as a sad clown, of course. The turn-based combat is appropriately unconventional and infrequent. It only happens once in the demo, but it allows you to attempt to resolve the fight through words as well as violence. This is determined by risking further injury, scoping out your opponent's beliefs and personality, and attempting to appeal to those strengths instead of weaknesses. A game like this is ultimately going to come down to writing, and my initial concern with these sorts of things is, that it would try and fail at imitating the particular language that Disco Elysium used, that singular mix of sorrowful poetry and comedically naked id. I think Glasshouse flirts with this at points, but certainly goes its own way with its tone, and is still successful at making you feel like kind of a perpetual dummy who's trying to play team sports when everyone is way more complicated and paradoxical than that. Whether the full game turns out to surprise or disappoint me, it's clear that there is a passion behind the thing, and I don't know, I hope they get rewarded for that in some way. Prove my cynicism for the industry wrong, please. Neverway is an upcoming horror life sim ARPG from developer Cold Blood Inc. This demo is promising and kind of interesting in that it doesn't give a whole lot of insight into what I imagine the sort of gameplay loop will be, and instead stands as a story-driven prologue to the full game's content. A very similar thing to what 1666 Amsterdam did, and I did play the demo for that, but that was more like I assumed that they were doing what Neverway did, where it's just like, this is the plot that leads to the gameplay, but with 1666, it's like, I think that was the gameplay. It's like, I think it's one of those games where you do quote-unquote detective things, but really there's just like glowing stuff and you click on it and then like a ghost talks to you. I don't know, I could be wrong, but either way I didn't include it in this. So much like About Fishing, I think Neverway displays a reverence for its inspirations, in this case the wholesome fantasies of games like Stardew Valley and Animal Crossing, but it also aims to drag those mechanics into a messy, adult hyper-reality full of complicated characters and horrors that are occasionally social, psychological, and supernatural. You play as a woman named Fiona who has pretty definitively receded into a deep depression, simply not showing up to her job, which gets her fired when she's forced to step out into the world to retrieve some items she left at work. The train ride home is full of ghouly guys that only she can see. Attempting to escape the train leads to a bizarre, impossible space that then leads to some kind of cosmic horror realm that may or not be real, as it is denoted by you disassociating. Back at her home, she's met by her girlfriend that she's been dodging, who doesn't even get to finish her breakup speech before Fiona storms off and wallows in misery. Here, at the end of her rope, she finally has the constitution to do it. To start over on a fabulous island. As someone who developed and came into being when games often looked something like this, I have to say it takes a lot to impress me with a retro pixelated art style, but this project certainly did. There are sort of layers to its style where walkable areas are very industrial, brutalist even, but low on detail, like something in between Super Nintendo and Game Boy Advance. But then you'll have these extremely detailed close-ups of food and items, as well as more quirky bits of design in the UI and on characters. Things as ordinary as a pipe you've pulled off a train to use as a weapon have little glowing cyberpunk greeblies on it. So again, I have little to say on what seems to be the main shit you're going to be doing in this game, but I can only report that I was, and remain, really psyched to get there. Phase Zero is an upcoming PS1-style survival horror game from developer Spinna Studio, who, according to the Steam page, is aiming for a 90s AAA experience, inspired by all the usual suspects in the genre, your Resident Evil and your Silent Hill. Though this is primed to be the studio's first full game, it's clear that its team knows intimately what made those games engaging, and what slight updating would be required to not entirely alienate the modern gamer. You play as one of several characters that are trying to survive an outbreak of some kind of horrible mutating virus that turns the citizens of Flint Peak into violent ghouls and covers the walls in mounds of pulsating flesh. The demo follows a guy named simply Guy, who wakes up in a hospital bed with zombies already looming over him. He escapes out of a window as a police cleanup crew sweeps the place, gunning the things down. There has clearly been a considerable time jump since whatever led to Guy being in the hospital, and most of the staff are already dead or mutated, with several parts of the building barricaded or locked down. Some readables hint at an experimental procedure that has caused coma patients to experience miraculous recoveries, which seems an awful lot like what must have happened to us. Hasn't slowed him down a bit though. He springs into action and starts blasting dudes and jiggling doorknobs. The only other living person you come across is a man named Alex, who wears a hazmat suit and speaks to you through little video feeds placed throughout, stuck in the hospital's basement. Every time the two of you speak, he's clearly neck deep in some kind of important work, clacking away at a computer and giving you advice on how to reach the exit. It seems like there is a story present in Phase Zero, but at least for the demo, it follows a character who is primarily concerned with survival and finding someone named Richard, instead of sticking around to find out why there is a big creepy underground lab and why he hasn't become a vibrating meatball like so many others. He's just trying to get out, a desire strong enough for him to cruelly leave Alex behind once he's able to get the front doors open, out of the nightmare and into Nightmare City. An obvious nostalgia bait art style that will immediately slice through my defenses like an orbital strike are the retro trappings of survival horror, the pre-rendered backgrounds, fixed camera angles, and inventive puzzles. It's all there, and it's all executed beautifully. That part of it is completely competent, but on top of that, there is a more modern sensibility where it's willing to be vague about things. It's willing to have your character be not that great a human being, and there's a lot more gameplay variation from the beginning that isn't just find the key you need. I mean, that is kind of happening, but there's also other shit happening that makes you forget that that's what you're doing. Much like the previous demo, this one sent a pang of sadness through me when it cut to the title, and I realized I could not immediately see where this goes.
You know, at first I was kind of annoyed by the Blink-182 reference, but this artful framing, I think, more than makes up for it.
RetroSpace is an upcoming disco punk, their words, satiric sci-fi horror immersive sim from developer The Wild Gentleman, responsible for a series now of games called Chicken Police that I either mentioned in a previous Next Fest or forgot to. In either case, that was a really enjoyable point-and-click adventure game with a weird, uncanny art style. RetroSpace, however, is a very ambitious project. I mean, just about any immersive sim is an ambitious project even when they have money to spend and never make back on them. Truly the most honorable yet thankless genre there is. In the distant future of 2177, the remains of humanity are in a deep sleep adrift in a retro-futuristic space station searching for a place to colonize. This is overseen by robots and courageous but expendable janitors such as the player character. I'm not certain where exactly the demo picks up, but there has clearly been a scene or two that we didn't see, and we wake up on the floor of a medical wing guided by a glitchy but optimistic sounding computer. The station is full of grim reminders of the Day of Tears, the day humanity's best took to the stars and left those that didn't make the cut to die, only slightly offset by the goofy attempts to improve morale like a designated disco area and the option to extend the party to your toilet stall if you wish. There is an impressive amount of character oozing from this project, and it's all fun, down to the slightly sassy sentry turrets that you're meant to evade, which say things like, "Oh, turns out I'm not alone," before blasting you with a flamethrower, feeling like System Shock meets Bioshock meets Red Dwarf, because you come to after a time jump to find that some of your buddies have abused a mutating drug and become horrible bugmen of a sort. It's brimming with love for the genre, embracing its staples, but also willing to add new forms of chaos like cloning defects as a punishment for dying. Should you die, you are, I guess, permanently dead, but just cloned slightly wrong with a randomized debuff, one of which made it difficult to use stealth because I was given the uncontrollable desire to curse loudly every minute or so.
This fucking shit.
This can be cleared up by absorbing the genetic material from your corpse. It even pokes fun at the somewhat absurd trope of characters leaving considerate audio journals on their corpses, acknowledging how silly it feels and how some have already recorded fake ones to scare the crew. RetroSpace also continues something I really enjoyed from the System Shock remake, and that's the bespoke animations when you pick something up and you look at it for a second and think, yeah, I'll shove this into my fucking head. Why not? There are some rough edges for sure. I think it can get a little too dark and disorienting for its own good sometimes. I simply don't care for how upsetting the movements of the spider enemies are. I think that's the only time I was jump scared by something after playing several not so great horror game demos. But mere seconds into this demo, you can tell this dev knows what the goal of an immersive sim is, and even if it misses the mark in the end, it will be a really fun playground for a bunch of unique systems.
I'm just not going to press that button anymore.
Shutter Story is an upcoming horror photo editing adventure game from developer Frostwood Interactive. You play as you, and your friend
Eli
has asked you to come over with some photo editing software for the purposes of proving to his family that their home is haunted, as the flickering lights and figure-shaped mold growing on the walls that occasionally expels worms does little to convince them. Immediately, what I appreciated about this game was the sort of slice-of-life mundanity of a normal household it was willing to explore before shit goes weird. Just little details like Eli's dad refusing to take his eyes off the TV during dinner, and his uncle nervously jumping at every little noise his new baby makes, as opposed to his old baby, of course. It sort of grounds things.
That is crazy. What's up?
In between photo editing sessions, you see more little vignettes of their life spent ignoring the presence in their home. The main attraction, I suppose, are these sequences where you examine family photos that Eli has scanned into his computer and use sliders and filters to find anomalies within. The software itself seemingly built for that very purpose, even giving you a handy guide to identifying what exactly the thing that's not supposed to be in the photos is. Of course, only some of the photos have something worth noting, and at the end of the scene, you're kind of graded on how well you analyzed everything. This is kind of interesting. It is creepy, but less so because of the things you find and more because of the amusing way they've replaced clearly real photos of people with less detailed 3D model faces. It has the novelty of one of those simulation type puzzle games where you're locked down at a computer investigating creepy stuff, but it's not really where the bulk of the plot is coming from. You can step away from the computer and watch this family decline into haunted house oppression, and that's kind of the part that I found the most fun. On top of that, there is an almost nostalgic layer of social horror that comes with going to a friend's house for the first time, and it's weirdly different than your own household. You know, like they eat dinner together at a reasonable time and like pray beforehand or some weird shit. You mean you don't just eat leftover pizza alone in your pile of blankets on the floor? Silver Pines is an upcoming survival horror Metroidvania from developer Witch Elm. In this surprisingly extensive look at the game, you play as a private investigator named Red Walker, who arrives in a seemingly abandoned small American town that is the game's namesake in order to track down a missing musician named Eddie Velvet. And that is just about the only really firm plot details I can relate to you, as pretty much from the jump it's clear that Silver Pines exists in a strange dream logic world where time, location, and sanity are sort of fluid. Using the familiar trappings of classic survival horror games, which are all solid by the way, and perfectly embedded into the setting, you explore the town, which is full of mutated creatures, bad memories, and suspicious characters. With no hesitation, I will say this is probably my most anticipated game of this bunch, and its atmosphere is immaculate. The Twin Peaksness is there, but so is the rest of Lynch's work. I get hints of Lost Highway and Blue Velvet, and just a touch of the paranoia and horror of the X-Files. Red's voice actor, who does a great job, has this particular Duchovnian, tired, mumbly voice that is really human and relatable even. Although I don't know a fucking thing about this guy, and he might not even be a great guy.
Eddie Velvet, I just got here. It's been a long drive.
Even your client or handler nudging you in the right direction talks to you in a patronizing and frustrated way, like you're just coming to after dental surgery. I also get the impression that there is influence coming from the Remedyverse due to the TV sets playing a kind of less serious neo-noir show that almost satirizes the tone of the game we are playing. Characters are animated in a rotoscoped style that looks gorgeous set against the environments, which seem to be a mix of 3D and 2D, but are full of detail and life. Combat is tense, at least for me, because I'd often forget the fucking controls and then panic. I don't have a whole lot more to say on it because I just really enjoyed it and I'm psyched to play the full thing in October. It's one of those games that is almost annoying. I almost hate how much it makes me want to do something as creative as it. It's like it's so in my wheelhouse that I've vaulted over wanting to play it and into I need to learn how to make a video game right now. And like the first stupid idea I would have would be technically what this is, but without the ability or restraint to make it interesting. I feel like that's probably counterintuitive to like what I'm supposed to be doing here, that the project that I'm like, oh, I really like this one, is the one I'm like, I don't think there's that much more to say about it, because it's kind of just like, yeah, obviously I would like this one. It's apparently dreamt up by my fucking doppelganger, so I mean, look at it. Spectra is an upcoming alt-history immersive sim from solo developer Ellis Tucci. It imagines a world in which the USSR has largely outpaced the US during the Cold War, a nation that's been on the decline since a fascist coup in the 1930s and is 3 terms deep going on 4 into the Nixon presidency. You play as a Soviet super spy named Number 6, and you're assigned to destabilize a corporation called Saturn in the fortress city of Hiawatha. The mission featured in the demo has you infiltrating a weapons development subsidiary of Saturn to gather information about their plans to create bionic soldiers. So even though you're handed a bunch of guns and wacky spy gadgets and let loose in an immersive sim playground, there is a wealth of text available to expand your understanding of why things are the way they are.
The fuck, it's not loaded? I'm a terrible spy!
There are a lot of the systems you'd want in an immersive sim. You can choose to run and gun your way through the levels, or use stealth and gizmos to make less of a fuss, or you can also just sort of fuck around with it and accidentally accomplish something, or use a spring-loaded boxing glove to find something neat. There's a wonderfully utilized briefcase inventory. You can smoke to steady your aim, though it's not exactly stealthy, is it? That would actually be an amusing trade-off to increased accuracy that, you know, every now and then you unleash the worst cough you've ever heard. There is a lot here that works, but there's also a great deal of potential, so I don't expect this to be done anytime soon. But it's so singular and interesting that I don't have a problem waiting. Until I check their social media, and they appear to be mostly working on a model train simulator, which is fine, and I guess not surprising. One of the more remarkable things about Spectra is how much care and thought was put into its history, its world, its design sense. There's an abundance of worship for the charm and the beauty and the ugliness as well of the 1970s. You can see it in canned goods, its billboards and magazines. It's all convincing and appropriate, but heightened in a really fun way. Of course, cops wear white go-go boots or flower-patterned dresses if you're a lady cop. And there's a lore explanation for that as well. I also respect it for being kind of fearless by making the US the enemy, pretty much, of the story, and not like, you know, in a Wolfenstein game where everyone's a Nazi now because Germany used an occult superweapon to win World War II. It's like, no, the US just did that, and now they're a problem. I can't describe, and I probably shouldn't try to describe, why I love the particular way enemies ragdoll, as though getting shot turns them into deflated blow-up dolls. I would often just get mesmerized watching the process of it all, and then wind up getting shot at. I mean, it's morbid, but it's fascinating.
Whoa!
Static Dread: The Submarine is an upcoming Lovecraftian psychological horror game, and the surprisingly swift follow-up to 2025's Static Dread: The Lighthouse, from developer SolarSuit Games. It opens with the nameless player character, a sonar expert, waking up on a submarine that has just been substantially damaged in the midst of a naval war zone in the North Atlantic Ocean. As the crew scrambles to recover, you learn that the enemy vessel that attacked you is of strange biomechanical makeup, and the crew decides the best course of action would be to go home. Complicating matters is the sub's nuclear reactor, which, due to the various damages you've sustained, will melt down in 5 days. The Lighthouse seemed deliberately constructed as a horror slant on a job simulation type of game, where there is a buildup of stress as you're attempting to perform your duties as a lighthouse operator, while having to make difficult decisions and being assailed by eldritch beings. And there wasn't that clear a trajectory for the story. It was more like an escalation of Lovecraftian elements, but was nonetheless charming and had a great atmosphere. The Submarine, however, immediately throws you into a more cinematic story with well enough defined characters, dialogue, and a less gamey framework to rest all the gamey shit you're going to be doing. Your crew's psychology sort of dovetails into the management of the sub, which is your job, as the captain has locked himself inside his quarters and simply relays orders through a little window. At the start of every day, you assess the waters around you via sonar and chart a path out of danger. Then assign the crew members to various responsibilities around the sub that need attention, playing to their strengths, but also keeping in mind their energy, their relationships, and sanity, essentially. You have a doctor, a navigations officer, a logistics and supplies guy, and an engineer, and each clearly has an opinion on how we should be handling things. And they will argue with each other and go behind the other's back. It's genuinely pretty fun seeing your choices alleviate concerns in one area but sow chaos elsewhere. It cuts off after you've made a significant choice in how to address the reactor meltdown issue, which leads to the discovery of a dead crew member who has clearly been shot by someone on board, adding further anxiety and paranoia between everyone. From what's playable, I think they've struck a good balance of job simulation, but also seeing the resulting plot that creates. Part is conceptually, abstractly creepy, but then there is a more visceral, hands-on horror element as well. I think this project spoke to me because of my appreciation for movies like Leviathan, Sphere, The Abyss, and Below. You know, they're all full of survival and secrets in the midst of a sci-fi threat. And then there's like the same genre, but in space, which is where this series will surely go eventually. Well, that's all I got this time around. I implore you to wishlist any of these that looked interesting, and more importantly, buy them when they are released. And I can't stress this enough, play them. I'm reaching a point in my life where I'm starting to realize I think the growing problem with gamers at large has been their refusal to game. Gaming has entered a bit of a dark period as of, 15, 20 years ago. But sometimes you forget and you're like, it got better, right? Oh, never mind. But it cannot be ignored how much the institution of NextFest has been invaded. Yeah, I missed last time, but the time before it, I noticed a number of projects that incorporated AI shit quite heavily. And obviously, but I still found 15 games to talk about, and looking back at the script, there was a couple I skipped because, I don't know, they were probably just redundant. You probably get it, I like 3 types of games, and it was one of those. This time there was a bit of frustration because it's like, even before AI garbage started clogging Steam's pipes, there was stuff on that storefront and other storefronts like PlayStation's and Nintendo's that I'd scroll past and immediately clock as some kind of shovelware. You recognize a particular flavor or substandard art and uninspired typeface choices, and you just know, oh, this is probably not even a real game. This is an anomaly that's posing as a game in order to wriggle its way into your devices. And it just feels like that is tripled because this AI clanker core creates the same response, where I'm just scrolling past listing after listing of uncanny pseudo game looking for real game, all of which, by the way, are ignoring the generated content of it all, like completely void of originality or heart. I mean, how could it have those things when its creation was assisted by something with neither? It just proves to me that, like, if you weren't gonna put in the work to make a game like the real way, then you're probably not like an ideas person, and you probably don't have a good idea for a game. I'm sorry. After looking at hundreds of these, I saw 0 that were like, fuck, what a great idea. Shame about it being AI though. Anyway, I don't know what can be done about it, but at this rate, I don't know how successful Next Fist, I tell you what, this Next Fest felt like a real Next Fist. I don't know how successful Next Fest can be at highlighting projects made by humans. I was hoping to collect another 15, and after a lot of digging, I could only find 10, which is great. 10 is a lot. But 15 was more.